In my last post, I alluded to some of the challenges facing workplace wellbeing leads. As a relatively new role in the world of work, not many people realise the scale of the task involved. Although there is a mounting stack of evidence pointing towards the importance of wellbeing today, which I'll touch on in a future post, there is also still a huge amount of resistance when it comes to driving change at the level of each organisation. As part of my master's research project, I interviewed 14 wellbeing leads working across a wide range of sectors from NHS and non-profit to large corporations. And they all talked about the importance of the environment in which they carried out their role. Some wellbeing leads felt their organisation was generally supportive of wellbeing. Senior leaders embraced a wellbeing agenda, and this trickled down to managers and employees. But in the majority of cases, wellbeing leads were dealing with different levels of resistance. When I analysed the data, I noticed there were three distinct factors which wellbeing leads described as barriers to progress. The first barrier was linked to certain behaviours, which were both ingrained and widespread. The behaviours included bullying and stigmatisation of stress and mental health issues. These behaviours were frequently linked to managers, but they were also seen more widely. Of course, we know that cultural norms that were seen as normal in workplaces just a few years ago are now seen in a very different light. We're generally much more aware of the impact of certain behaviours and why they're unacceptable. But as we know, change doesn't come about instantly. It requires upskilling, and that's just as a starting point. It requires embracing new values, and that certainly doesn't happen overnight. Wellbeing leads, in fact, are often catalysts for change in this by introducing training, for example, around wellbeing-centred management or other areas. The second barrier to change is simply a lack of awareness and understanding of what wellbeing actually means. Basically, people don't know what they don't know. Wellbeing leads shared with me conversations they had where colleagues were genuinely perplexed about what wellbeing is all about. What does it mean? Is it happiness? Or people would say, oh, I'm old school, I don't believe in all of that. Or the blind spots could be at senior leadership level, along the lines of, well, if problems occur, well, follow the procedure. And they didn't necessarily recognise that well-being could be an underlying issue that could and needed to be addressed. Finally, the third barrier that was mentioned was around organisational authenticity, when there was a mismatch between an organisation's stated intentions and the actions that were actually being taken. I'll aim to develop the concept further in my next post. But the interesting thing that stood out for me on this point was that this gap in authenticity, often referred to as wellbeing washing, wasn't always seen as intentional. In fact, the wellbeing leads I interviewed shed quite a nuanced light on this and the fact that organisations were often trying hard to change, but there are lots of other factors that come into play as well. Overall, the common thread across these three types of barrier is passive resistance, inertia, if you like. No one is actively trying to block wellbeing progress, but the reality is more that change takes time and a lot of work behind the scenes to build awareness and understanding about the need for well-being, let alone implementing change itself.